Alright, so this is just going to be a quick exercise in building a budget Niv deck. So what I've done is I've done a bit of research and I found that using the buy codes and packs, for example, if you're new to Arena basically and you want to build a Niv Mizzet deck and you've just started your collection so you don't have anything, what you can do is if you go online and search for Arena codes, there's a website Draftism that will have a select number of codes for each set. For example, play SNC is play Streets of New Capenna, and that will automatically redeem you free packs. And you can do this going back through every set. They have a list. It's very efficient. Now, if you combine that with playing some other stuff, what I calculate is that if you wanted to get 4 mythics, on average you would have 8 rares. So what we are going to do here is we're going to call this deck Niv Budget Starter. Niv Budget, or Niv, my first Niv deck. My first Niv. So here's the big issue with this, assuming that you've just suddenly got Niv. What you're going to want to do is you are going to have to use your 4 mythic cards to get Niv Mizzet. Now we are going to have now a set of 8 wild cards left. Now, ideally, I would highly recommend that you would use 8 wild cards in the rare slot here to build your land collection of rare lands. I would highly suggest that you grab potentially triomes, some of the shock lands or check lands. I'm going to build this deck assuming that you don't want to use the money on the lands, or the lands are something you'll update later. But I would highly recommend, if you are going to do this, you would go with lands as your opening look into. Yeah. So, what we will do, just for sake of time here, did not mean to click that. We're going to add one more land, because we're going to run a 25 land base, and I will tweak the land base later. What I want to do in this video, for the sake of things here, is collected and not collected. I want to go through every colour and show you potentially what I would recommend you pick up. We're going to exclude, obviously, Mythic Rare, because we're assuming that you've used all your Mythics. I will potentially just cover what else you could do with going forward after that. Right, so here we go. So we'll move through these flip cards here, and we'll go to our Azorius cards. Now, Vetoes, I highly recommend these as a pickup. They're uncommon. Other potentials for the uncommons that I would say here is to look at potentially Faithful Mending, just for some card selection. Absorb is a rare, so I would write that off as a no-go. Deputy Detention is also rare. This is the problem we're going to run into here. We're going to have 8 rare slots, and I have a pretty good idea of what I believe we should probably use these rare slots on. Time Wipe as well is another rare here. Now, I have actually, before we go into this fully, I should stress this, I would also recommend that we grab a companion. Now, is companion the most optimal? I would recommend that we grab a companion. I would recommend personally that we use Gigantha. It's a good starting base, and it's a good card to have from your sideboard that potentially could score you some free wins. It does limit some of our options though, so for the purposes of this, I'm going to assume that we're not going to use a rare card on the companion. What we will do though, if we turn to Azorius, I would suggest that you use maybe a 3-2 and 1 split based on how you want things to go here. So, some of our options. Depose to Deploy. It's a good split cards, particularly on a budget, have some good potential with obviously tapping a threat, drawing a card, creating some Thopters. But for our free cards, I would suggest that we maybe get 2 copies of Veto and 1 copy of... I'm going to be stingy here because I'm going to try and suggest that we don't use all of our uncommons, because uncommons are also going to be in a premium, I personally think. Obviously, we would want to upgrade this as much as possible as we go forward. Right. I say that we are going to add we'll add 1 Faithful Mending. Again, commons, if we can get away with commons, we'll go for commons. Now we're moving on to options here for Azorius, Orzhov. My brain just died on me. Now, obviously, everyone who knows this deck knows our optimal choice here is our Vanishing Verses. Now, that would take a lot of our rares, because we would have to use potentially a few of them. If you don't want to use your rares on that, there are some other options. We have Final Payment. We have to sack a creature though, so it's a bit awkward. There is Rite of Oblivion, Fractures, Desparks, Humiliate. There are some fairly decent options here. Now, we have a budget of 8 rares, assuming that you have 8 rares. So for this purposes of this deck, we are going to add 2 of them here. We are down to 6. I need to keep track of this, so I'm going to end up making a huge mistake. Right, so we've used 2 of them. We still have 6 left. Now, if you don't want to use your Vanishing Verses here, you can also use your Mortify, which is over here. So we will take a copy of Mortify, and you can split these cards how you want. I would also recommend, if you are potentially thinking to run Dire Tactics or Despark against the bigger threats. But I would say these are the cards you definitely want to look at for Azorius. You want Mortifies, Vanishing Verses if you've got the rares, or Despark, Dire Tactics, or Fracture. Again, very solid choices. Alright, so we will move along. Okay. Another rare to consider, I totally forgot, is Edgar. It's good to have another threat on the board, so I would say you should pick up... I don't think you should pick up an Edgar. Edgar is a great thing, but currently, the current meta is shifting very much, I think, towards Rat combo and vehicle effects, so they're going to have effects to deal with Edgar, but I would mark him as a one-off, so... Yeah, we'll put 1 of Edgar in here, so we're down to 5 wild cards now, 5 rares. Right. Dimir. Dimir is straight up and simple. You want Drown in the Locks, or you want Tyrant Scorns, or 40 Erasures for the sideboard Tainted. Yes. Now we have 3 options to us here, so we're going to take a Scorn and 2 Drown. But yes, so for Dimir, you want to craft Drowns and Scorns as your priority. 40 Erasures are a sideboard card, definitely to be considered. If you want to play if you want to ration, Ashiok is also great here. Obviously, if you're running the Gigantha Companion, he's not as great, so it's one to consider. For commons, you really struggle for commons here, but Notion Rain is good card selection. It's a bit slower, as well as Silk Agent is a fast one. Unmoored Ego is great if combo decks are very prevalent, and so is Hostage Taker. But I would primarily use your Dimir color to score, change this layout here. I would primarily use your Dimir colors to score, what I'd like to say, early interaction or counter. So, moving along now from this, we can move into Izzet. Now, obviously, we're not looking at the higher up threats, but one of the ones I will say to earmark, if it's a card you wish to enjoy, would be the Scarab God, if I can find it. Where's the Scarab God gone? Oh, Scarab God is mythic, yeah. So one of the things I will always say, we'll look through the mythics at the end of the set. Right. Izzet. Express Iteration is finally banned, so we don't have to worry about this. Now, my choice for this, obviously Prismari commands, if you have the rare, are really solid. But there's also good options in Invade the City. This can be a good ender if you have the effects to deal with it. Saheeli, Sublime Artificer, is also a great threat on her own here. If you can get one of these resolved and just start churning out your spells, she's going to be amazing. But, as I've said before in some of many other matches, Wandering Mind, with its ability to dig 6 deep, is just really good. Even if you're not going to blink it, just the ability to go, oh, okay, we want 3 copies of this, and we'll dig 6 when it enters, and we have a body to block something later. In terms of our rares, I mean, obviously we discussed Prismari Command, that would be one to look into. If you're playing a more control meta, Ionize is good. Niv is a good finisher as well. Obviously you can't run this if you're running the if you're running the old Gigantha Companion, but it's one to consider. Battle of Frost and Fire is a pseudo board wipe, but it is another rare, so we'll consider that not to be looked at. Right, Rakdos. Rakdos is an interesting one. Rakdos is another color where we really want it to be skewed into our removal. So, uncommons to look for, I'd say Angra's Rampage most definitely. If you're really struggling for cards and you really want to fill it out, Torch Fiend is still pretty fun to just chuck down and have a little blocker, deal some damage. Angra's Rampage if you're winning a control matchup. I would also recommend maybe Bloodtithe Harvester. It's surprisingly good value, a free 2 for 2. That gives you a late game loot if you want it later. Something to consider. Other than that, rares to consider are definitely Kolaghan's Command. Super versatile answer to most things. Also, Bedevil is a good removal if you can find some of that. Looking through the rest of it, there's not a heck of a lot more. Cut to Ribbons is another rare, which is a shame because it's such a good, fun card. But yes, I would say if you don't have it and you want to stick with commons, I'd say Unlicensed Disintegration is another good shout. Angra's Rampage is great, but they have the choice of what they want to get rid of. And with most of our other removal being higher up, I'm going to add 2 Angra's Rampages, and I will add a single Unlicensed Disintegration. This is to keep our rares down. Right. This is going to be the interesting one. This is Golgari. Now, anyone who's seen my previous videos on the channel know I love playing Cram Session because it lets me run the Learn package. I'm not going to run the Learn package for this deck, but no, this is a good budget option. It's basically, for those of you who don't know, Learn lets you grab out of your sideboard any card with the lessons on it. I would suggest you look through them. They're very diverse, ranging from pinging damage, destroying artifacts, removing creatures, producing tokens. It's a good all-round catch, but again, a lot of the lessons are also higher rarity, so if we were to splash into Learn, we'd have to have a good lesson package ready, which, just for sake of showing here, we will just go to Lesson. So these are all the lessons that we have, and as you can see, most of the ones that we would want to run, there are some commons. So obviously Environmental Sciences is great for sorting out things, Introduction to Prophecy for scrying and drawing. There is good removal at common, so this common package would actually be pretty decent. You know what, I'm nearly talking myself into playing this, just for the sake of it being relatively budget. We have burnt a lot of uncommons, and I know a lot of people probably won't have that many uncommons if they're making a relatively new deck, so alright, as much as it pains me, I'm going to go with the full 4 Crown Sessions. Then we'll move to our sideboard, and we will only use the common lessons here. So we'll put 2 Environmental Sciences, 2 Introduction to Prophecies to sort out some later draws, 2 Intros to Annihilation to deal with things. Then we can add 2 Pest Summonings. So I'm going to assume that you're not going to fill out your board entirely because you're not going to have the greatest thing. So we'll stick with an entirely lesson-based sideboard here. Obviously we'd want Mascot Exhibition, but again, that is a full-on right here. Right. So what we're going to do, for the sake of things being interesting here, we're going to add a Fractal Summoning for its movement forward, and then we'll add 1 Containment Breach and 1 Start from Scratch. So we are... No, I think we'll stick with a common only sideboard. So we'll put in more Elemental Summonings here. Now we have, obviously we have more here than we can tutor for, but this is just playing to our outs, and we may want to bring some of these mainboarded if we have to. So let's craft this common, because I didn't have a second Introduction to Prophecy. Alright, so let's assume that that's going to be most of the sideboard. Let's get back to our... Yes, so as I said, this is going to be a totally new to Magic deck, Magic Arena. So you would have probably be running low on uncommons. We still have some to spew. Now I will say, for the sake of looking at options here, I personally love Wither-Bloom Command. It's not to everyone's taste, but Assassin's Trophy is some of the best removal you'll have here. Other things to consider is Binding of the Old Gods, pretty decent and uncommon. There's also Putrefy is rare. Death Sprout, uncommon again, good removal, and Ramsus. Claim Ritual being a rare is a shame because it's such an amazing card. But yes, we will move on from this. Casualties are always a great one if you can get the rare for it. Right. Gruul. Gruul is going to be a hard one, because a lot of the good Gruul stuff is actually higher ranked. For example, Sin Divines is good, but it's definitely higher ranked than what we could do with. What I think we'll use Gruul for is we'll use Gruul to drop us some creatures. We also want to stick. 5 could be a good shout. We don't have any treasure producers, so stimulus package really doesn't do us anything too good here. Blizzard Crusher being a rare is a problem because I don't want to use more rares. River of the Wild is good as a sideboard card. Alright, so we still have some rares here. We still have 5 rares to consider. Do we just use... a 2/2 that can pump itself, Domri's Ambush. We got a Clan Mage, we got the Tycoon. Gruul has always been a problem for me, particularly in these lesser formats. One that I've always considered relevant is that we could use... Warden of the Chain could be pretty decent just for sorting out us some... Zavala could also be good as a late game investment. Alright, so assuming that we're still running Finn, let's get ourselves some... Right, we'll still want some choice creatures here. What I'm going to suggest is that we are going to use again this is such a hard choice on the old thing. Right. I'm going to suggest that we're going to use the Kessig. We need basically 2 mana deals something. Alright, so for the sake of saying that we're still struggling with rares and commons, we will just use Jetmir's Fixer. It is not a good card by any stretch of the imagination, but we're filling out the space. If you get a surplus of rares here, once to consider it, definitely Escape to the Wilds. Court Crushed Cracker if you're not using anything to escape. Firelife if you've got a good concentration of basics. Sin Divines is good for the control matchups, and Clothis if you have the mythics to deal with it. Alright, to our Boros now. We will need Clarions. So I'm going to suggest that we take 2 Clarions and 1 Solar, when I find it, Solar Blaze. So that uses 3 more of our rares. It's not pretty, but it's probably our best option here in this color combination. Now, what would we even consider to replace it when using that? I would say Thrilling Discovery is garbage here. But in terms of commons, we don't have much in the choice. Onward to Victory is a surprisingly good card. You've seen me use it in... It's a one-shot kill with Niv, basically. You could also run the Skylight Legionnaire if you're definitely struggling with your commons. Right, so we'll move on from here to Selesnya. We have 2 rare wild cards remaining. And I suspect we might use them here. I would suggest the Pig or the Knight of Autumn. These are both very good cards, very good choices. There's also Tolsimir. But I'm going to say that we should stick with Pharaoh Elder. Man, there's so many good cards when you think about it here. Alright. Okay, then assuming that we are sticking with our current options, I am going to say that we pick up the pig. Because treasures are very prominent right now, and that's our last two rares. Now, no surprise to anyone if we go to a choice here. Growth Spiral is a common, automatically a 4-of in here. Now, if you want to not run Growth Spiral because you be crazy, there are other options. I say Decisive Denial is a pretty underlooked spell here. It's basically fight spell / counter, so it can kind of answer both a creature and a non-creature spell situationally. Other ones to look at. Excuse me. I'm very tired over here. There's obviously Risen Reef, Rogue Refiner, good just general value cards. Eureka Moment is a 4-mana instant that draws 2 cards and puts a land into play. It's a slow Growth Spiral, but you know, it's also pretty decent. Frilled Mystic, if you've got the mana for it, is a good option as well. Tamiyo can be a good choice in here. Colossal Sky Turtle is also a very good choice. Now, I would say, as I said before, sticking with the choice of straight up hitting, you know, let's get rid of this. So with 24 lands, we are a well-diverse deck. Let's have a look at our stats here. Right, it doesn't show us our rarity, which is what I was after. A lot of 2-drops. We've got a good curve of aggression. We literally are split perfectly apart from a little bit more black. We have 13 creatures, 14 instants, 9 sorceries, and 24 lands. No planeswalkers, as expected, obviously, because we are saving our rares and wildcards. But now, for the sake of austerity here, let's assume that you have some spare mythics. Right, first things first, these are like game enders really, you want to look at things that would give you joy. So honorary mention is obviously Tybalt. If you think you can get up to 7 mana, it's absolutely bonkers and insane. Mila Companion, against a more crazy creature-based deck, this works out pretty well. Obviously we don't have Bring to Light to do the blink effect, but it's good. Now, and finally, Azika, God of the Tree, the Prismatic Bridge. If you've built your deck in a certain way, this can be absolutely backbreaking and very solid and fun to use. Also, it can be cheated with the Bring to Light strategy, but since they're not bringing Bring to Light to this format till Double Masters, conspiracy theory on my behalf, we've got to wait and see. Now, going through the 10 guild colors. Right, if you have spare mythics, Hero of Dominaria is your choice. It's pretty much one of the best options. Planeswalkers we can do, win more card. I rage against it every time control play it, but it's still the best shot. Right. If you want to use it here, I would recommend you potentially Ezekiel's Overlord, Awaken the Blood Avatar is a pretty fun combo if you can pull that off. Kaya the Inexorable, if you can get her ability to protect / let you recast your nivs, great. If you can get her -7, which isn't unreasonable in late game, she's amazing, so she's one to consider. Scarab God is a great choice in your Dimir. I would also recommend maybe Ashiok, Nightmare Muse, or Kaito Shishisei. These are all good choices for your finishers. As you see here, obviously mythics are bombs and things you could consider to finish off a game. I would recommend Royal Sirens is a good shot here because they loot, they have high loyalty, they can also pump a creature. Aside from that, there's not too much great to finish a match with in... Is it? You can get a lot of value out of a Ral if you can get it done. Excuse me. But all in all, a lot of these are more the Slinger-based decks to consider. Again, another instance where you will probably want to use your Izzet spells to counter, disrupt, or gain advantage, like the Wandering Mind. Alright, moving on, we have Rakdos. Obnixilis, I was so high on this card when it came out, but I've dropped off. I don't think it's as good as it says. Kroxa is always a powerhouse and something to consider. It's really hard to deal with, and we will burn through spells. We want to get to the mid to late game, so we will be burning through removal, counter, draw spells. So consider Kroxa as your finisher if you like that. But I would say pretty much most of these are viable if you build around them. Like Captive Audience is still a fun one you can build around if you think you could get it off. I'm just saying what I believe. If you completely need guidance, what I think would be one of the best things to spend a Mythic on in this format. Right, Garruk is a really strong Planeswalker for 6 mana. I would play him as well. Nissa is also surprisingly deceptively good. Obviously, play her, drop a land, get a landfall, minus her return a Niv or creature you've lost to the battlefield. Always worth it. Polukranos is a good recursable threat. Again, unfortunately, it is expensive and it costs you 6 cards to. It's not terrible. Like I said, there's any one of these you could really use as a finisher, but those ones I'd bless on. So I would also recommend, if you had spare Mythics for Gruul, you could either use them on Arlinn, but I would also recommend Klothys, because Klothys isn't like the nuke to the graveyard, but she's also just, okay, well, I'm an indestructible thing sitting on the field that you can't deal with, so every turn you're going to take 2 damage unless you do something. So I would recommend Klothys for the more grindier matchups. Nothing too great. Alright, in Boros, Winota is banned, so don't worry about her anymore. Outlaw's Merriment, I would highly recommend. If you're not a Gigantha deck and you want late game stability, this is one of the cards you should definitely consider. Just churning out a creature every turn with haste, and you know, very, very good. Apart from that, I don't think anything's too leaps out of me. Selesnya, if you want to use Selesnya, I would say Tristani is your best bet. She's just 3 bodies and an Anthem effect and a way to stop steal effects if they come up somehow. Nothing too crazy. Right, finally, what would you get from Simic? Well, Coma. Maybe as a sideboard card, just to grind value and get it up. But that would be my personal choice as one of the best things you could play here. If you have the spare Mythics. Obviously, if you want to try something crazier, like Hydroid Krasis is another good one. If you don't think you're going to get to 7 mana. So it's always one to consider. But yes, so this is our deck. Let's look at how we came out in the end. In the end, we have a pretty decent curve, a lot of early interaction. We're running a sideboard of environmental studies. I will work on the mana base in testing. Like, obviously, I want to look at how this performs. I'm not going to use anything above. I think I'll just use common lands, just for the sake of saying that we don't want to overextend. So let's go with common land. This could be painful to look at. Now we do have the basic land types here for snow. We have some of the everything's going to be slow, people. But I will work on this and I will make a super budget. So, as you can see here, there's our 4 mythics. Our rares spread between Yishan, Solar Blaze, Edgar, all our 4 drops, Deafening Clarion, and our Vanishing Verses. That's how I would kind of split them. But again, you don't have to split it this way. I've gone very budget. I even think I probably went too many on the uncommons. But, you know, this is how I think it would go if you want to build your first Niv deck, if you don't have any collection at all. But again, this is what you have to do. You have to... It's one of the reasons why I love building Niv decks. You have to play the game, see what you lose to, tweak what you think will do well. For example, one thing I remember in my games was Angrath's Rampage. I was like, they always have 2 or more creatures, so it's never going to be the one I want them to get rid of. So, yeah, we'll change this out for something more solid. As I said, just play, refine, gain wildcards, just have fun. But if you want to use this as a basis on how to make a fun casual Niv deck, we will take this into some matches. I'll release them probably a day later because I'm going to go over all the lands now and do some bot testing and some casual testing. But yeah, hope you enjoyed this.